Hello and welcome to this video. On this video we're going to be changing our lower control arm number 2s on our 2002 Lexus GS300. The reason being is occasionally it clunks. Usually it's this bushing here that goes bad and it wears out, so we're going to go ahead and replace these. So the first thing we're going to do is get on some safety glasses, put the car up on ramps, and go ahead and get it jacked up and put on jack stands and wheel chocks and all that stuff. So we'll come back and show you how to safely work on this vehicle. I have the driver's side old control arm off, and the new one is sort of installed. I'll kind of tell you how we did it, and we're actually going to, on the other side, go over there and show you step by step. But basically, we loosened, there's 2 bolts and a nut that are 14 millimeter. We loosened those on this side, and I think it's a 19 millimeter that goes on the stud that goes to this piece right here. And then we loosen the 2 19 millimeters that go here. We had to use a breaker bar. We have a power driver, but we couldn't fit it quite underneath there. So we got everything loose is the first thing we did. And then also I wanted to mention some safety things that we did. We have a floor jack under the center of the car. We have jack stands on each side. We have another safety jack over here. We have the wheel underneath the body in case anything was to fall. And I did have a jack stand under here while I took the old part out. And what we did is the X-bar or X-frame that goes across the tensioning are framed to keep this everything straight and aligned. We took it loose on both sides so that we could pull it down far enough to pull this piece off. And what we'll be doing now is putting this plate back in. We took this plate out, and so we'll put it back in. So, but I moved the jack to underneath the control arm because what I'm going to do now is take the nut loose and go ahead and reinstall this plate loosely, because I have to go over to the other side now and do that arm. And to do it, we found out the easiest way is to loosen the plate on both sides so you can actually pull it down to get this out. There's a little bit of the plate, I think it's this piece right here, that won't let you clear here unless you pull it all the way down. So, so far, pretty easy. What I'm going to do now, though, before I go over to the other side, so I'm going to go ahead and torque the bolts that go into right here. They're 19 millimeters. And I think the torque setting is 122 foot-pounds, but I'll check that. I'll come back and we'll tell you. Okay, these 2 bolts here are the ones you're going to torque to 122 foot-pounds. So I've already done that. I put my torque wrench on. Actually took a couple of us because we couldn't get the right angle. So 2 of us pushed on the torque wrench, got it to 122 foot-pounds on each one. And we did tighten them up little by little so that it should be equal on both of them. So now what we're actually going to do is go to the other side and replace it and leave this side loose where that plate goes, because we need to be able to pull this whole X-brace down on the other side as well. So we'll go over there and get started and show you that. Okay, I'm on the passenger side now. What I've done is taken the lug nuts off this wheel. So I'm going to carefully take it out, and I'm going to put it underneath the vehicle before I do anything more. And then I'm going to take a 19 millimeter impact socket. I can't get my impact driver underneath here, so I'm going to use this breaker bar with a cheater bar on top of it to break those 2 loose. And it takes 2 people for us because I'm old and I'm weak. So we're going to break those loose, and then we're going to, I'll show you what's next after that. Okay, so here's my setup on the passenger side. First of all, I have a jack under the rotor here with just a tiny bit of upward pressure. I have auxiliary jack with a board underneath the main subframe. Of course, I still have my jack stands in place. I have a safety tire in the back, the big floor jack in the middle. I mean, there's no way this is going to go anywhere. So, and the reason I did that is because you have to put a lot of force to get these bolts loose. They're 122 foot-pounds underneath here, and to break those loose are really tough. And then I'll give you the torque settings for the other ones when we put them back in. But what you do to get this big member out is somebody has to take a crescent wrench and bend it a little bit so that the stress is off this piece where it attaches down here. And then what you're going to do is just use a ratchet and a 19mm socket to take those two large bolts out. And they're very easy to come out. They'll come out by hand if you put some reverse tension using a crescent wrench. And then we'll be able to take a rubber mallet and just knock that whole piece loose, and it'll come right off. So when we get to that point, we'll show you. Okay, got these two giant bolts loose from what I call the knuckle or the hub or whatever. They're underneath this part on the opposite end of here. And again, when those go back in, they're going to go at 122 foot-pounds. This piece now is loose, and I can go ahead and take it off. And by the way, when we put the nut on that, it's going to be 112 foot-pounds. And then the nuts and bolts that go into this plate that goes there, they're at around 43 foot-pounds of torque. So I should be able to easily pull this off now. It just comes off. I have to reach in with my other hand to pull the X-brace down a little bit. But it'll just come loose, and I'll wheedle the new one in there. And then I'm actually going to put the nut on it with no Loctite or anything. I'm just going to put it so that it goes all the way up. And then what I'm going to do at that point is another person is going to take a crescent wrench and wheedle this so that I can get the bolts lined up into the other part when the new part's going in. And so I'll get that done. It's really hard to show. It's easier to talk about. So when we get to that point, we'll try to show you on the camera. Okay, I have the new piece in, but I have not actually put these bolts in yet. To get those bolts in, one person's going to have to twist this down while you carefully get the bolts in. You want to make sure you don't cross-thread them or damage them. You have to just start them by hand and make sure they go in. If they don't go in, just take your time, because if you cross-thread them, they're ruined. Okay, so I did put the nut on here temporarily just to hold this, to keep it from moving while we have to twist it to get it into the right position. So again, it's done with two people. One person moves the crescent wrench to twist it. Now, if you have a better set of tools, which would be a lift with another auxiliary lift that lifts up the rotor, then you don't have to twist this. And there's a good YouTube video on how to do that. But this is the layman's method. So far, everything on this job has been going really, really, really easy. And maybe that's only because I've been working on Mercedes for the last few weeks, and they are not easy. Okay, so again, I'm going to actually put some Loctite 222 on here. That's low strength, non-permanent Loctite on these, and we're going to put these in and torque them up to 122 foot-pounds. So we'll get that done, and we'll come back and we'll talk about putting all this back together. At this point, what we've done is, as we had stated earlier, one person used a crescent wrench to adjust this so I could get the two bolts in. Got them in and tightened down to 122 foot-pounds. This one, this nut here, is going to be 112. I actually put this plate back on, but I haven't reconnected the crossbar yet. All I've done is put one bolt in to hold it into place, and then the nut that goes on here. This gets 112 foot-pounds. Each of these nuts and bolts get about 43 foot-pounds. So I'll do those on both sides because I have the whole bar, the X-brace loose now. So I'll get all that put together, and then I'm going to come back and put this wheel on. And then at that point, we can go ahead and lower it off the jack. So we'll make sure we remove all the jack stands from underneath. So all we have left is the floor jack on the central jacking point in the front. We'll carefully lower it down onto our little ramps, and then we'll be basically done with the job. We'll take it for a test drive. Really, really easy. If you have two people and if you take your time. This is about an hour and a half so far we've been into this job, and that's including filming, maybe 2 hours. We were quoted, I think, $500 from the Lexus dealer, and they said it'd take 6 hours. I don't see how that's possible. So we're pretty glad we're tackling this ourselves. Again, easy job if you have two people and if you have the right tools. Thanks for watching.